Good evening, folks. I have been sitting on this topic for a while because it's one of those things that for a while I was like, I don't know if I can really talk about this without knowing your particular situation. And I realized I can. There are some across the board tips that do work for everybody. This is a rewiring around challenging people. It's a pretty specific, it can be very specific because there are, I think, a lot of us who have, again, this is a bit more of a DNRS focused video. Although, again, these tools can be applied to anyone in a challenging situation with a person, any person, whether you live with them or not. But yeah, it took me a while to find tips that I knew would apply across the board. So let's dive in. The first thing, when it comes to recovery, specifically, if you're doing DNRS or any other brain rewiring, program, it's really important to have a priority scale. So, and a lot of times one of the questions I get a lot as a coach and just in general is what do I train on first? What should I train on? What should I focus on? And I always recommend that people train on the things that are most important for your basic everyday life first, and then branch out to things that are more exterior after that. Things that are not as necessary for day-to-day life. So, for example, and this is why a lot of people, when it comes to other things, you train on maybe laundry detergent first before you train on food. Something that's more if you need to wear clothes, that's a little bit more basic than eating. If you've got foods to eat, you can wait. And for me, I trained on some foods, the ones that I really cared about and really, really wanted back in the first 5 months of my recovery. And then the rest of the foods, I didn't train on for another 2 years because I was I don't care. Not important. I've got the ones I care about. So when it comes to people, this is if you have relatives that you can cut off contact with for a period of time, like parents or grandparents or cousins or just extended family, people you don't have to see, or not, or people who are not family, people that you can just choose not to see or have any contact with. You can literally just pretend they don't exist and go about rewiring and reestablish contact after rewiring. And that's, again, with people who are really triggering, especially, and if they don't live near you, that is definitely the best course of action, because how to handle those situations becomes very clear once you're recovered, but it's very, very difficult to navigate with a limbic system that's on high alert. So it really serves you and the other people best if you wait until your brain is calm enough, because you're going to handle them and be much kinder and more compassionate and more of a rock to them if you wait till you're recovered before trying to reestablish that relationship. Then there's people who you can have limited contact with on purpose. Those people you may have to see on some regular basis, but it's limited, so you can kind of use those interactions as specific incremental training. Like somebody maybe you have a conversation with for work once a week or something along those lines, where it's for sure limited and you can use it as incremental training. That's another situation. And then there's people you live with, which we kind of have to keep solid boundaries up, and that's kind of what we're going to go into here, because for me that was my situation, and for a lot of the people I know, who I know and who are doing DNRS, clients, friends, buddies, etc., along the journey, a lot of us have lived with people who were one of our biggest triggers. And so, and it's still possible to recover in that situation. So I'm going to share from that perspective because that was my experience. And it's the most challenging one. So I think if, for those of us who've recovered while living with our biggest trigger, the rules will apply. It'll just be easier for people who are more exterior. But definitely minimize the training around people to what serves you in your day-to-day life, just making day-to-day life easier. That should always be your priority when thinking about what do you want to train on incrementally. Focus on what's going to make your day-to-day life easier to start with, and what's really important to you, like your nuclear family, close friends, being able to do things with friends, whatever. That should be your guideline for incremental training, is always start with what's most basic for your day-to-day life and your well-being, and then go out from there as you get more stable. Okay, so that was priorities. So that's number one, is just priorities. Prioritize people. If you've got a list of people you want to train around, kind of put them on the priority list. And some people, again, those no contact people, wait till you're fully recovered. Some people it is necessary to wait, and it really just does you a favor, because it makes it a lot easier. And again, and this is something I think a lot of people, if you're doing DNRS, I didn't realize this really until I did it, that we still rewire around things after we're recovered. It's just much, much easier. And so that's why it's really, really a huge gift to yourself and, again, to the other people the people you're working with to to cross the finish line of recovery before you rewire around them, because it's just going to make it infinitely easier. Okay, so when it comes to people you're training around, general rules number two is the less conversation or interaction you can have with someone during the recovery period, the better. And this is something that I looked around at the world at one point, and I was just kind of it's kind of amazing standing where I stand now, because I've told people a lot of times, my coaching clients or friends or whatever, like, just don't talk to them. And they're like, really? I can just not talk to, like, my spouse or something? And I'm like, I didn't talk to my spouse for, like, a couple of years, basically. It was basic little tiny conversations. And at one point we planned to, like, go over a list of things on Friday nights at one point, because that was what we had to do. Like, that we just, interacting was so painful. It was so, like, just not helpful that we did that. And even those conversations were a bit like pulling teeth, but it was like something I could train around. I could prepare for it. I could do rounds afterwards. And we got through the basic, like, business aspects of, being a married couple with 5 kids, in a way that was cordial and planned environment. It's calm. There's no kids interrupting, etc. So, and honestly, like, that really just allowed both of us to have the space to handle our own pops. Because my husband he didn't do DNRS, and he doesn't understand DNRS, but I saw him, like, I know what it looks like for a person to be catching their pops. And he had, he reacted to me, and he needed to deal with his stuff, and I needed to deal with my stuff. So there was just a lot of us giving each other space so we could work through our own emotions around each other and our beliefs around each other, and work on changing those things apart from one another. But this is something as well that's just a societal thing. And one of my favorite movies is, oh God, no, not that one. Megamind. And at one point, this woman who gets captured, because it's the supervillain and the superhero, but it's all, like, made up. It's very, it's the cartoon. And it's like this cliche thing, like this routine they go through every time, where the villain captures this girl and the superhero comes and saves her, and she's like, girls, you're both pretty, can I go home now? Like, because they were just arguing and bantering back and forth, like the supervillain and the superhero. And my parents did this too. I noticed that when I was a kid, and I recognize it in them because I lived with them, but I see it everywhere, where people will just, and I'm sure you've seen this. You see someone, and you see whether it's yourself and another person, or you see two people, a married couple or brother and sister, or people at work. And once one person opens their mouth, it's like you can predict exactly how the conversation's going to go. It's the same. It's like it's a limbic loop between two people, and you're like, how it's going to go down, and you're sitting there thinking you're both right and you're both wrong. And that's so often what happens with people when we're retraining around them. And so it's really helpful to just not have that conversation, just not start it to begin with, because we know where it's going to go. We know it's going to trigger old limbic pathways that we want to die off. So there's no point in talking. It really is an act of courtesy, and it creates a lot of peace when you don't have unnecessary, like, my husband and I, even now, we have a great relationship now, and we just talk so much less. And what we do say is positive and meaningful and makes us closer, but there's just a lot more peaceful silence between us, which is lovely, and I really enjoy that. When you do need to have conversations with people, keep them to the point. Make sure they have a point. Because again, a lot of times that dynamic of people kind of, the predictable pattern, if you know that that's something that's likely to happen, make sure there's a very concrete point to what you're saying. And if one of you gets off, kind of try to guide the conversation back to, we're having we're trying to reach a conclusion. There is an actual, A to B in this conversation. Let's get to point B, and then end it at point B and go about your life. So that's a really important one. Keep conversations to the point. Make sure they have a point. Switch that order though. Make sure they have a point, and then keep it to the point. And then if emotions get heated during the conversation, politely excuse yourself. And if the other person won't stop talking or emoting, just walk away. Like, if you've excused yourself once and they won't stop, just walk away. Walk away, leave the room, close the door, elevate your mood, do a round, whatever you need to do. But that's the point at which, training zone's been exited for both parties once one person has lost their cool. And it's, for the sake of everyone involved, it's best to just walk away and elevate your mood until you've completely forgotten about everything and you're just back in your happy space. There was something else I was going to say. I can't remember it. If it comes back to me, I'll say it later. Okay, this number 3. So that was number 2. So far we have priority scale for people who we're wiring around. keeping conversations to a minimum, noticing the patterns, the loops between people, making sure that conversations have a point and that you keep to the point, and then making sure you walk away if things get heated and politely excuse yourself and walk away, go elevate your mood. Behind a door. That's really important to get that physical separation. Leave the room. So number 3 then, stay in an elevated mood around the person. And remember that it doesn't have to be, your elevated mood doesn't have to be connected to the person. You just need, your brain works by these patterns of association. And when you're doing an activity or you're around a person or you're in a building, whatever the main theme of your emotional state is surrounding that noun, the person, place, or thing, is the association your brain's going to have with it. And that's how we rewire around things, is just by creating a positive association, being in a positive emotional state around that noun, that person, place, or thing. So for me, because I actually, for a period of my recovery, I lived down here in the basement, even though this is technically my parents' house and we live upstairs, because I just couldn't handle being around my husband or my kids. And I slowly, incrementally trained on like keeping my headphones on and listening to music, and my husband would get mad at me about the fact that I was, kind of off in my own little world, but I had to be off in my own little world because my brain was too triggered by feeling like I wasn't welcome in my house. And I kind of chose opposites, like I deserve to be happy and at peace in my own home, and really focused on keeping my brain in my music, in my happy space, in whatever, shows I was watching as I ate, and I would just purposefully stay in the chaos at times with an elevated mood to prove to my brain, hey, it's okay. My kids crying can't hurt me. My husband yelling can't hurt me. Being around these people cannot hurt me. I can stay in an elevated emotional state, and it's okay to be around a bit of noise and chaos. And it does take a lot of effort. It takes a lot of emotional effort and strength. And this is what boundaries are. Again, it's an interior boundary to say, I deserve my happy bubble, and I'm going to keep my happy bubble no matter who's around me. No one else's energy can get at my happy bubble. That's what boundaries are. So do whatever it takes, and it's a training zone. It's a muscle you have to exercise. It's not easy to keep that bubble up, but it's possible, and it's something you do for shorter periods of time, and then eventually longer and longer ones, and eventually the switch flips, and your brain's like, oh, this person's cool. They're fine. And that's my brain went from kind of perceiving my husband as this like super threatening monster to just neutral. Oh, that's what I wanted to talk about. Neutralize people. That's really important. I actually took my wedding rings off for like 3 weeks because I needed to like train my brain to understand that my husband was just a person. He's not different than other people because he's my husband, because there's this pop that comes in sometimes around certain people that it's like, well, this is my mother, or this is my husband, or my wife, or this is my child. Like, the rules don't apply because of the proximity of the relationship or the kind of relationship, and that's a pop. So neutralize people. That's kind of part of staying in an elevated mood, is neutralize. Just create a sense of this is just a person. They're not a monster. They're just a human being like every other human being. And after 3 weeks, I put my wedding rings back on and I was fine with it, but I kind of had to teach my brain like to just see my husband as just a person. After that, after I succeeded in that, that was when we started being able to have conversations without any emotional charge left in me afterward for the first time ever in our relationship, which is kind of a big deal. We've been married for almost 11 years, so it had been a long time that I'd always had either a positive or a negative emotional charge around talking or interacting with my husband. And then after neutralizing him, he was just a person, and we could talk about something and I could just move on to the next part of my life like nothing had happened, because nothing had happened. So kind of staying in that elevated or neutral space around someone, and just extend the periods of time you're doing that for, because it's a muscle you have to exercise. So, start with 5-10 minutes if you can, increase incrementally from there. That can be an incremental training if you want that. And then the fourth one is, do not ever let them in your head, ever, for any reason. Never think about what they're thinking. Do not allow yourself to ruminate and go back to the past. If you have a conversation with them and you're like, you can tell if it's limbic. Obviously, we sometimes go back to a conversation like, well, what time did we say we were doing that thing? And, but you can also ask them again. But like, don't let your brain go back and ruminate about what they said, what they might have been thinking, the look on their face, the tone of voice, any of that stuff. Ever. Same for future. Just stay in the moment. Once the interaction's over, you move on to the next part of your life. That's really important. This was another tip from my same friend who spawned the entire positive mindset video. She told me, and this made it was a huge game changer. She said, pay attention to what my husband, because he was the person I had to train around the most, but pay attention to what he says and not his tone of voice or body language. And that's very counterintuitive because the limbic system likes to pick up on those subtle cues. But when people are acting greater than they feel, a lot of times, and my husband was definitely acting greater than he felt around me, like he would say things and he meant them from his higher self, but his limbic system was still like, nah, I don't like you. And so those were the vibes I was getting, was the, I don't like you vibes. But yet he did love me and he was trying to be kind. And I kind of trained myself to just pay attention to like, what did he actually say, and completely forget how he said it. And that was huge. That really helped to just stop that negative feedback loop between the subconscious brain, my subconscious brain, and his, of me picking up on his body language and then getting heightened, and him picking up on my heightened and getting more heightened until we were just completely escalated. When you just pay attention to what the person says and take it completely literally and just move on to the next thing, it takes all that limbic BS out of the equation, and you kind of, create a new baseline of calm between the two people. So I know a lot of people like to include people in their rounds. That can be helpful. I think these things are far more helpful. If you want to include people in your rounds in a positive way, if that's in your training zone, go for it. But honestly, these 4 things are far more effective in the long run. I included my husband in rounds for the first about 4 or 5 months of my recovery. And then there was just no point, because at that point he didn't want anything to do with me. So I was like, there's not really a point in including him in my rounds, because it doesn't even seem like he wants to have this relationship. Ultimately he did, but and we rewired, our relationship has healed without me including him in rounds for most of my recovery, so that's optional. So yeah, that's that. And it can be done even with the most difficult, relationships and the most difficult people. So it's just a process. It's like everything else. It's just keeping your brain cool around them. So yeah. Best of luck. This is one of the most challenging and the most rewarding parts of recovery, is being able to have your own emotions and to wrap around anybody. It's amazing. So good luck. Enjoy the benefits of becoming Zen around every person.